Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. As we record this show, it is September 11th, and it's the 22nd anniversary of the terrorist attacks on the United States. Today's guest is retired Colonel Pierre Gervais of Island Pond, and he's here to talk about what life was like for him after that morning. Welcome to the show, Pierre.
Thank you much. How are things?
Oh, they're doing great. It's hard to believe that 22 years has passed since our lives are all changed.
Yeah,
but yours changed a little more than others.
Yeah, it was an interesting perspective, if you will. I entered the Army in 1989, did my training, my basic officer training, and went to Hawaii. And when I was in Hawaii with the 25th Infantry Division, 1990-91, we had Desert Shield, Desert Storm, which really lasted about 6 months. But thereafter, we were largely an Army at peace, and as an officer in the military, in an Army at peace, a lot of what we do is you train. You do a lot of training to make sure that you're ready to go to combat if and when that should happen. But you're really never put into a situation where you have to sort of determine, a combat scene, if you will. But up until then, in 2000 and let me see. I went to the Command and General Staff College in 2000. It was 2000, 2001. And as you know, 9/11, 2001, that's when it happened. And we're all in class. There's over 300 students that go to the Command and General Staff College in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. The intent of the college is to train young majors. I was a major at the time in the art of staff work as well as strategy and operational operations. That's what you do. And in one of the classes, that's when we were there that morning. The TV was on, and we saw the first plane go into the tower. And right off, we started having discussions about it, but then they canceled class and they sent us home. And I went home and sat there with my family, my two kids who were 2 years old at the time. You look to your left and your right, and you start to say, well, this is real. Things have changed.
Did you know after the first one hit what it was, or did it take the second one hit and before it really dawned on you?
Yeah, I thought it was odd. Obviously, the news channels were all trying to do their own analysis into what it was. But once the second one hit, that was pretty much it. And then, of course, the one that hit the Pentagon. And, it just, at that point, we realized that we were under attack and that things had changed. And they had canceled class the next day as well. And then when we did go back to class, you could tell that the students had a different, including myself, we had a different focus at that point. Because when you're finished, which was going to be about, I think, 5 to 6 months later, when you finish, you're going to get sent to a division somewhere, an Army division. I happened to get sent to the 101st. And the 101st was one of the ones going to Iraq at the time. That's where we got our orders to go. And that's when you start to realize that, when you sign your name on a dotted line coming into a military, it doesn't really dawn on you until you get put into a situation. But the profession that we're in as military members is to protect and defend the Constitution, which obviously, and this nation and its citizens. And that's a big deal. And when you put that into, at all costs, sometimes for the ultimate sacrifice if needed. And, that's just a military perspective. But the other aspect of professions, nurses, doctors, policemen, firemen, all of those, they have the similar context where you have to save lives or protect and defend and to ensure safety. And sometimes, it requires the ultimate sacrifice for that. Um, but your mindset changes. Your mindset changes very quickly when you're in that position, you're in a profession that is going to demand it, and all of a sudden you're overseas and you're about to go into combat, you know.
And you're just you've been on the show, 2 or 3 times, and so you're a Northeast Kingdom boy. Well, transplant from Quebec, but you grew up in Island Pond and graduated with me and from North Country High School in 1984, and now you are headed to war. Did anything prepare you, as in besides your military training, did anything growing up prepare you for what you were going to see and do?
Um, that's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to say that, my parents instilled a sense of discipline in me to get things done, even though I didn't do it all the time. But there was if you want money, you have to have a job. If you want things, you have to work hard to get them. And so working hard, that aspect of not just trying to have hand-me-downs, but working hard, went into my thinking and my attitude, I guess, when I entered the military. So
Well, because you're not from a long line of U.S.
no,
veterans.
no. In fact, my uncle Richard is a veteran of the Navy. He was almost got sent to Vietnam, but it. No, the Gervais line. There's not many. My uncle Noyce, on my mom's side, I have some that live out in Canaan and Colebrook, that were in the military. My uncle Pat was in the military. My uncle Walter was in the military. My cousins, Paul, their kids, they were in the military, but not from my side.
So, when did you ship out to Iraq?
2003. It was the beginning of 2003. Yeah.
And what was that feeling like?
Well, like I said, an army at peace, you do a lot of training to prepare for combat. And now everything that we had trained for was just being implemented, but for real. It wasn't going down to the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Polk, Louisiana. It wasn't going to the National Training Center in Fort Irwin, California. It was actually getting all of our equipment into planes and trains and flying out overseas, land in Kuwait, set up a base in Kuwait, make our plans and missions, and then move and cross the berm. And we weren't the first ones across. The 3rd Infantry Division, the 4th Infantry Division, so heavy mech and armored units crossed Iraq first. The 101st, because it's heavy on helicopters, went in afterwards. And largely what we were doing was kind of cleaning up as they were moving forward and getting rid of the other enemy, the smaller villages that they weren't hitting. The bigger cities were being hit by 3rd and 4th ID, as well as obviously the Air Force and the Navy were participating with their assets, and the Marines as well. So it was really a joint effort. But for me in the Army, I was literally rode from Kuwait in a Humvee with my brigade commander, a full bird colonel. It was his driver, a full bird colonel, myself in the back seat with a commo guy, and then we had a couple of other Humvees, and we traveled from Kuwait all the way up through Baghdad, and then we ended up in Mosul, which is the northernmost city in Iraq. In late 2003, we ended up there. And that's where we had our base of operations for the remainder of the time that I was in Iraq.
And how many tours did you serve in Iraq?
I did one in Iraq, but I did two in Afghanistan subsequent to that.
The one thing I have heard about with the people, I'm not sure if it was Afghanistan too, but the one thing I heard about the people who landed in Kuwait was instantly the heat. The heat was something that we're not accustomed to. Did you experience that as well?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. In fact, the heat off of the jet engines from the planes, we dismounted off. The heat was hotter in Kuwait than it was off the jet engines that were after landing. I mean, so it was it was really hot, oppressive.
I could imagine. So just touch on Iraq just a little bit. What did you see going on there from a military perspective?
Well, like I said, a lot of it was sweeping through. At the time, the mission was to find and decapitate basically Saddam Hussein and his henchmen. And I don't know if you remember at the time, but there was somebody had developed a deck of cards. It was 52 individuals. Yep. That were part of his key chain of command, part of the Fedayeen and some of the guard, Republican Guard that held him secure and stuff. So that was largely our mission. And then once we cleared that, then it was securing and then allowing the people to take over. So forming a government, post combat, it's allowing the people there to form their own government and get back to at least a sense of normalcy and civil works that they can do. As you know, that didn't work out really well, and I don't want to talk politics or levels above my, when I was a major, but the way that it went about probably could have been done better. And it's easy to go back in retrospect and always second guess decisions that were made.
Then Afghanistan, what was Afghanistan like? That was a different world in its own, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, Afghanistan. I could go on and on about Afghanistan, but if you think about it, there's been several attempts to conquer Afghanistan, starting with Genghis Khan and some of the other big-time generals that were trying to occupy, Alexander the Great, etc. And just couldn't get through. I mean, you got the Hindu Kush, you've got cultures, you've got ethnicities, you've got tribes, you've got all sorts of things. And it's close to Pakistan, it's close to China. If you look at it on a map, there is the environment is just, you can go from desert hot down from Kandahar and then work your way up to the northeast and you're in 12,000, 13,000 foot elevations as part of the Hindu Kush mountain range. So the country itself is just very distinctive and every single part of it was unique.
Now, to tie it back to 9/11, because, there were people still there were probably some people who served in Afghanistan by the end of the war who didn't even remember 9/11, because they were so young. If you look back now at 9/11 and you look back in retrospect, did anything good come out of the wars? Do you feel like, Vietnam now, which you've been to Vietnam, not as a foot soldier, but as a person going back looking for MIAs and such, they're a very welcoming country now to Americans for the most part, including returning veterans of that war. Do you think you'll ever be able to walk the streets of Kandahar and be safe?
I don't know. It is such, it's a loaded question, Scott. It is such a unique country where every single part of that country has a different and distinctive culture. Um, and the Taliban right now, obviously ruling with an iron fist. I don't see it unless something changes where economically they can't sustain themselves and they start reaching out. But then you got to look at what countries are going to support the Taliban. I mean, you could throw out a whole bunch of conjecture, and I don't want to do that here, but there's countries around it that probably would try to. In fact, China's got a very, very strong hold on a lot of the resources, the mineral resources that are sitting in Afghanistan. The biggest copper deposit in the world is sitting in Afghanistan, and China owns it. You know, there, there's a lot of resources there, but it's landlocked. There's not anywhere you got to go. You got to export materials. You have to import materials, and I'm not sure that the Taliban care, number one, but I'm not sure that they're astute enough to want to work that, at the highest levels. And maybe they do, but I'm just not sure any government's going to want to work that with them. So I doubt it. I doubt it, Scott. To answer your question, no, I don't think I would ever be able to walk Afghanistan safely.
Do you want to comment about the pullout and how it went in your eyes, or is that something you don't want to touch upon?
The only thing I'd say is that we lost a lot of blood and treasure that I think was unnecessary. Again, it's you make decisions at the time. You can get all kinds of opinions and thoughts at the time, but as a commander, you have to make a decision. I'm not so sure that the decision was well researched and well thought out, but when it was done and you make a decision, then you want to support with 100% of the backing of the US government. And it looked like that's not in fact what happened. And I think we lost some blood and treasure unnecessarily, and that to me that's just a shame. It really is a shame.
Okay, back now, looking back at Iraq, I think we talked about this just privately. I think, wouldn't you say that's a bit of a different story on some of the country has opened back up to business to foreign travelers, including Americans?
Mm-hmm. It has, and it's again, it's been a slow turn. But when you look at how to rebuild a country, where do you start? You have to have a government that can sustain itself, that can govern all parts of the country. Then you have to figure out how you're going to import and export. And I think it's been a slow turn for that. The pieces were largely in place in Iraq. Saddam Hussein had that in place. It was just a matter of finding the right people to run those pieces. In Afghanistan, other than the military, which we worked really hard to train, their military, I don't think those pieces are in place. And even when we did have them in place, there was such corruption from the highest levels down to below. That's the way they, tribally, that's the way they worked. That's the way their culture was. It was a barter system. Everything they did was on a barter system. So if you wanted something, you paid for it. Well, they continued doing that, but they took it to the nth degree. And I'm not sure that the pieces are in place right now to be able to work diplomacy, information, military, and economic aspects that are needed.
I had a guest on, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. He had been a humanitarian worker in Iraq before the war, and he remained there during the war, which he said was a bit dicey. And then after at least leading up to the end. And he said that out of that war, he actually saw some things good that went on. Like he said that after Saddam was toppled, you'd be seeing a lot of satellite antennas going up on even mud huts. They were being open. He said the world was opened to them. So they were starting to get a better view of the world out there. I don't know if you saw any of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. After we pushed through and we got up into Mosul, the first year, I forget how I used to put it, but it's kind of like when you graduate high school and you go to college, right? You're in
Right.
high school, you're still with your parents, you still have to take a bus or you drive your car, you still have to come home at night, you still have to, you're still going to have dinner on the table. You really don't have to fend for yourself. And you're limited because your parents are limiting you because you're under their roof. Well, you go to college, all bets are off. At that point, you're on your own. And so what you had in Iraq was millions of people who have been just let out of high school and are now in college. And so antennas are going up. You had free for all. You had no governance. You had no police. So everybody's just like whooping it up. And how do you maintain that? How do you get control of that? And at the same time, trying to rebuild, the country. So yeah, there was antennas going up. There was stores opening, and but everything with stores opening, you're going to have people who are going to steal. Well, there's no cops, so who's going to stop them? And you had, there was no rule of law because Saddam Hussein ruled with an iron fist. People weren't allowed to do anything, or you got your butt beat. Well, that's no fun. Well, now I can do anything, and I'm not going to get my butt beat. So yeah, we saw all kinds of it, and to be as a parallel, Afghanistan went through the same thing. Once the Taliban largely left, and we were there, it was a free for all. People were like, okay, we can try to do what we want to do. But if you remember in Afghanistan, even before the Russians went in, Afghanistan it was a beautiful country. You could walk around and do whatever you wanted to do. And, it was an operational country dealing with its external partners, and it was really in a good place. And that changed.
So I'll ask you this same question with Iraq. Then, do you feel that someday you will be able to return to Iraq as a military veteran and be able to walk the streets of Baghdad, maybe even meet some of the enemy soldiers?
Yeah, I think I'd do that. I don't know if they would admit that they were enemy soldiers, but yeah, I'd feel comfortable going back.
Oh, you would
Iraq
now
is,
already?
what's that?
You would now already or in the future?
Yeah, I would know, just to get a perspective.
So, yeah, because you've lived I have a friend who spent time in Saudi Arabia as a woman 20 years ago. And you take that country, and you said now she would not even recognize that country
Yeah.
because they have progressed so much.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's definitely advanced. Still has its challenges, but it's advanced. Heck, men are now allowed to wear shorts. Women can go out there without their abayas, as long as they have their long sleeve shirts on. Um, Women can drive, which was something that was not even thought of back then. And I think the the fact that social media is so out there, the internet is out there, it's impossible unless you close it off like Saddam did, or North Korea is doing, unless you completely block it out. Iran's kind of doing the same thing. You know, you got generations of people who are coming up now and they're like, I'm not liking the way that this is going, and we're going to make change.
Do you think Iraq is slowly going the route of Saudi Arabia about becoming more open?
Um, it largely was.
Okay.
It largely was after Saddam Hussein. You know, it was. It wasn't. It wasn't quite the same. So yeah, I think so.
Okay, we only have a few more minutes. So we're looking back at September 11th. Would you, and if you were the commander in chief, would you have gone the same route, or would you have, you know, maybe done things different, or is that like a book that you need to write?
Well, I'm not an author, but I would tell you, I think again, as a commander, no matter what level, including the commander in chief, you make decisions with the information that you have at the time. And at the time, I probably would have done the same thing. Look, somebody attacked our country. You know, this is an eye for an eye kind of deal. You know, we're gonna get back after the folks who did this. Took obviously a little bit longer, but how you go about that process, you know, that's what matters. So the commander in chief made a call, and how the process went. Well, maybe some changes could have been made. But that's easy to do when you look back at it. You know, it's easy to
Right.
second guess history. It's easy to go back and say, well, it shouldn't have made that call. We lost 10 men and, you know, it's your fault. Well, okay. You weren't there on the ground and you didn't have the information that I had at the time. And it's hard to replicate that at that moment, what you're going to do. It's nearly impossible. And I have a big issue with a lot of that nowadays where we have these investigations that go on and, you know, it's time, money, and the waste of precious resources, specifically the men and women in the military, to do these, to go back and look at something, unless it was a heinous act, unless it was something against, you know, the law of war. Uh, you know, you can never replace the loss of a human being, ever, ever, ever. And you have to grieve for those that we lost. I've lost men, and I've seen it. And you know, the parents want answers, and that's okay. But how we go about getting those answers, sometimes it takes a lot of time and effort, and sometimes it just doesn't change the course of what happened.
Okay, well, we're just about ready to wrap up. I want to thank you for coming on the show again. Thank you for your service, and welcome back to Vermont's Northeast Kingdom. You've settled back into your community of Island Pond, and you started your business yet?
Oh, we started. We've started. We haven't opened yet, but we've started. I thought I retired after 30 years in the military, and now I'm getting back into something else. But we're close to opening. We're hoping within the next couple of months we'll open the coffee shop and the bakery here in Island Pond, and we're really excited to have that opportunity. There's a beautiful community, obviously, in the Northeast Kingdom, including Newport and all the way out to Irisburg, Coventry. You can go through the whole Northeast Kingdom, and um, this was something that we felt was needed in this town, and we're very positively hopeful for it.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on, and thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.
Thank you.